Hello everyone, I just want to thank you in advance for clicking on this video. If you haven't seen the final project that this explainer video will be showing the behind the scenes of, I've linked it in the description and maybe in the cards depending if I can figure out how that works. Now without further ado, let's get into this. Why did I decide to make one of the most complex animations I have ever created in After Effects during the thick of finals? Well, because I found this video by Erwin Rowan, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, on his process making a short character animation on After Effects. It wasn't a tutorial, but from the way he explained it, something in me just clicked, and I wanted to finally start making this animation that I've been stirring in my head since I was 13 years old. So I made this behind the scenes video to hopefully inspire other animators and give them an idea of what it takes to make an animation like this in After Effects. So the first thing I did was I had to see if I can even make the horse gallop in the way I wanted to. I had to make an entire rig-like structure, and the reason why the colors are like that is so I can see what exactly each body part is, and it's in a vague color combination of like the front legs, or the legs facing me or closer to me are the pink ones, and then the behind ones or the ones further away are the green ones. The important thing about After Effects animations, especially when you're making everything in Illustrator, is that you have to kind of create this illusion of 3D in a 2D plane. Then the hair was a very light blue color, the body was a deep red color, and then the head was orange and the neck was yellow, once again to make it very obvious which body parts were which. And then I had to go through everything and make sure everything was labeled properly and make sure it vaguely looked like a horse. This wasn't like the final version of it, but this was to give myself kind of like an idea of like how this would work, and even just testing my ability to draw in Illustrator, because I've never been like the most detailed illustrator, but this was really going to challenge basically everything I've learned so far when it comes to Illustrator and After Effects. So then I imported everything from my Illustrator file into After Effects using this plugin called Overlord, which makes it so much easier to import objects back and forth, and it even does text and gradients really well. And to me, in my opinion, it's just easier than the normal importing of Illustrator files into After Effects. It costs a little bit, and it's not perfect, but I highly recommend it, and it's very convenient. Anyways, so then I had to go through the task of figuring out how I was going to move the horse's legs. As you can see, references are pretty much everything. I found a bunch of illustrations of like cell animations and how people and photos of horses, and just to get an idea of how they move. The reason why I chose the horse first is because I've always drawn animals before people, just always. That's how I've been. And I've ridden horses. Growing up, used to ride horses, and I had an idea of like how they move and the gracefulness and the bounce of their movements, and sometimes they spend time in air for a couple seconds, which is why getting the movements really accurate was very important to me. And as you can see here, I have to move every anchor point so that they bend and rotate in the way that I wanted to. Most of the animations, pretty much for the entire animations, it's a mixture between path animations and objects of like the typical rotation position, all that stuff. And I never really used the path animation to this extent until now, so this was a whole new learning experience, but the results they speak for themselves. Like when I was watching the video, he made that entire animation just with the path animation, so I thought that was so incredible. I was like, yeah, I could try just basically using a similar technique as his, but applying it to what I made. And then I kept seeing it break. I know that there's a way to parent objects to each other, but I didn't have the patience to learn that today, and I still don't. I didn't learn it. I technically learned it in class, but I forgot, obviously, as you can see. So I had to painfully move everything even as it was breaking. But, you know, it was a learning experience for all of us. And I didn't really mind going back and forth in between the frames. I was going by, I believe, in total it was like 16 frames I was working in. And then I was trying to make a keyframe every 4 frames. Yeah, that's how I made basically everything you see in the entire video is made in 16 frames. And then I try to do 4 frames per thing, because I'm not like, this isn't typical 2D hand-drawn animation. I'm not going to draw a thing for every single cell, so that's kind of the rhythm I was going for. And it also works in 4/4 because, you know, music, I've been a musician my entire life, so I wanted it to work really well with the typical 2-step thing. And then the most important thing is that you get it to loop at the end of your 16 frames. And then we finally have the first pass animation. It's not perfect, but it was enough for me to keep going. For the second pass, I created a whole human model based on this drawing that I doodled. The character we're going to call Eli. Eli is definitely the most detailed thing I've ever drawn in Illustrator. With all the details comes, of course, many, many layers in both After Effects and Illustrator. This is why you must name all of your layers in both Illustrator before you import them into After Effects. I spared you from watching me draw that. Drawing Eli and the horse probably took 3 hours, probably something around there. So I'm going through all the layers, making sure everything is nested where it's supposed to be so that they move in the way that I wanted to. This was a challenge. I've never dealt with this many layers before, but it was tedious. That was the only word I could use to describe this. Very tedious to get everything where it's supposed to be, and it was confusing and hard to figure out, like, where did the legs go? How do I want to animate each thing? Where do I want the anchor points? And as you can see, I'm animating the stirrup. Technically, the stirrup should not move that much. If you have a stirrup in your horse that moves that much, then it's way too loose. But it's kind of just like exaggerating the movements for the sake of this animation. Like I said, I've ridden horses before, so I know what's accurate and what was just exaggeration for the animation. This also with the hand. So he's riding Western style, and I'm mostly ridden English style, which is where both hands are holding the reins. So I didn't know what to do with his other hand for a while, but in my head I always pictured him riding Western style, so I had to kind of figure out on the fly what I was going to do with the other hand. So I just made him do like an opening and closing animation, basically on loop. Animating the jacket was fun. Animating the fist. So like most artists hate drawing hands and stuff, so that fist, I know it's not the prettiest looking fist ever, but it does what it's supposed to do. It's holding the reins. And it was actually not that hard as I thought to animate it, and so I animated the reins moving with the horse. The horse flowed beautifully with Eli. Yeah, and I made it's not just a copy and paste of the other horse animation. I had to make a completely new animation for this new horse model that I made. Another thing about drawing on Illustrator with the intention of animating in After Effects is that you get to be very specific with the amount of points you make. Like, see, I'm animating the shadow, and it's a lot to keep track of that many anchor points, and you're like, how many should I make? Should I make a lot? Should I make a little, depending on which detail I want to impart? Or like, can I even handle having that many vector points in a scene? So it was a huge challenge when I was drawing this to not only make it look good, but also make it in a way so that it wasn't a nightmare to animate later. Pretty much the entire animation with Eli is him bouncing up and down with the horse while he's standing in a gallop. Most people don't really think of people moving that much when they're on a horse, but you're moving. Like, it's a whole body workout you're kind of fighting with the horse's momentum. You're trying to stay in rhythm with them, but it's very challenging, and you're often standing/kneeling when you're in the stirrups and you're on the horse. So I really wanted to illustrate that in pretty much every single piece of every fabric of his clothing and his hair and his hands and his shoulders and his hips, to really get the point across that he is moving up and down with this horse. Not like super bouncy. The front view is more bouncy than the side view, but I believe it's believable and organic. So when I finally got the animation I was happy with, originally I was going to copy and paste the keyframes like a psychopath, and then I learned that there are expression controls that will infinitely loop the keyframes I made so that they makes my life a million times easier. So then after the animation looked good, I had to go through all the layers and put in a loop out expression and this equation for every path animation. If you don't know what expression controls are, it's kind of like the coding of After Effects, and you could do some really crazy things like I barely scratched the surface of, but it's a very cool detail in After Effects, and one of the reasons why I chose to make this animation in After Effects rather than trying to learn Adobe Character Animate or whatever. And this is what the second pass looked like when it was all done. On to the next phase. The front view was extremely challenging, both drawing it in Illustrator and figuring out where the layers were going to go and how they were going to interact with each other. I made a first model similar to like what I did with the other horse. I made a multicolored model, and then just to figure out how they would look like. Animating the horse's legs was really hard because I was working in a 2D plane obviously and trying to give the illusion of 3D, like the horse was coming at you. More on that later. References were the only way I was going to figure out how to make the horse move. And then later I noticed that the horse's eyes were just staring blankly right into the camera, so I later animated the eyes on both the front and side views. At this point I wasn't even sure if it was going to look good. The only reason why I was recording was because I was cautiously optimistic about the whole process. And here I was actually deciding which frames of the cell animation that I found where I was going to actually use, because obviously there was like I think 18 frames, 18 illustrations there, but I needed to pick main ones that I could kind of smooth and transition to, and in how After Effects frames transition to one another. So I found 4 or 5 I think that I was happy with, and then kind of moved around that sheet I found and figured out how to get the horse to look like that, which was really challenging to figure out. And once again, timing and math, a lot of math, and timing is everything. I actually didn't remember that those were 3D, I'm not gonna lie, now that I'm looking at it. I just remember playing with the path animations a lot, and then in like the middle of making the front horse, I realized that I screwed up with how the horse kind of is in midair for a little bit, but I think I just messed up the timing with the back legs and the front legs, I think, and I had to like redo it a couple times. It was very, like I said, very challenging, this front view. I'd never done anything this complex, and now I was doing it in a completely different perspective. But yeah, Eli once again was the easiest part of this animation, because the only thing complicated was getting the stirrups or ropes in layman's terms, the stirrups and the lead to move in the way that it flow nice with the horse's head. So that was the only interesting thing about Eli's animation. Once again, he's just moving up and down during this process. For the face, it was really important that I had this very dramatic shadow looming over him, because at the end, when you watch the video, you'll see why that is. And it was, I think that the front view came out really good when it came to how the look of Eli and the animation I made with his hair, and I think it turned out pretty well. And even though you can't see the lower half of his body at all, I still made a gun and a holster and a belt and hips, just so I didn't lose my place when animating him. That's literally the only reason. Like, you could see in the when it outlines the path points, it's literally like you can't see it at all because it's behind the horse. But I did that just because I needed to know where his body ended and the horse began and where the legs started, so I left it there. And I think I still left the gun in the holster there, even though it was not necessary at all. But this is what happens when you're animating something like this. And as you can see, once again, I'm going in and adding all the expressions accordingly, and then I created this very dramatic horse coming to the camera moment. And as you can see, now we have a really big jump from just making the horse and Eli to now we have a whole environment to work in. After the comps were done, I was done refining the comps enough. I made a little scene to figure out how I was going to move Eli and the horse in the context of the scenes that I had storyboarded. I created a bunch of assets to give the whole video an old western vibe. I want the duo to be quickly riding through the brush in time with the music. I chose this particular version of Two Step by Dave Matthews Band because the intro is one of my favorite 2 minutes of music ever, and the crescendo at the end of the intro is epic to me. And my Illustrator file looks like a mess, I know, but as long as everything is in the correct layer and is labeled, it's fine. And I also didn't record myself making the back view because I didn't know if it would even be in the final cut. It was definitely the weakest part of this project, this is why you can only see it fully once in the final animation. And as you can see, I made a little scene in my Illustrator file just to get an idea of how to use the perspective of all these assets, and I tried to make them all very highly detailed. Making all these assets alone took probably 3 hours, because everyone who's been in Illustrator knows that simple drawings take so long in Vector for some reason. And especially I wanted to make these little rocks look like they were 3D and like you were moving past them. So here's how I made this sort of optical illusion using these rocks and just like shades. Basically, you can boil down Illustrator into just kind of making optical illusion with shapes. The biggest part of this animation was playing with perspective and the 3D tools that Illustrator has, After Effects has, sorry. Originally, I made this stupid decision of moving the camera and the horse because I didn't want to move the objects, but in the final animation, it's the complete opposite. For the most part, the camera is stationary and the horse is not moving, and it's the environment moving around the horse to give the illusion that it is moving throughout the desert. But yeah, making enough variety and kind of moving them around and manipulating the assets is how it makes it look more organic than just like copy and pasting everything over and over again. Like, I made another big sort of hill, rock, mountain thing just to give it some more variety. My biggest fear was that it's going to look like it was just repeating the same scene over and over again, and I really kept that in mind in the final product, especially when I'm moving and deciding which assets go where, and just giving enough variety and to make everything look unique. After I was happy playing around with the comps and the environments and learning how I was going to use this 3D space with the 2D objects, I was finally ready to start a new After Effects file and create everything you see in this storyboard. And here it is. When I say I started a new After Effects file, what I meant was that I made a copy and deleted a bunch of extra stuff that I wasn't going to use. Every single comp that you see on the main timeline is basically like a fractal of layers in time. Even after I created the horse animations, it took me a while to actually sit down and lock in. Creating something, I've never created something like this, and it could be an overwhelming task, but since finals were now over and the weather has sucked for the last week, I was finally able to complete it. It's times like these where I wish Adobe tracked my hours, because I would love to know how long this actually took. The only reference I have to go by is the footage of the time-lapse, which by itself is over 4 hours, but that's just what I filmed. Now let's talk about the illusion of 3D and a 2D space, which can pretty much be the motto, 3D objects on a 2D space, which can pretty much be the motto of After Effects. So basically I had to make everything super spread out in order for this particular scene to work, and it was challenging to figure out what objects I should put or animate in 3D and what objects can I just make a path animation for. The bird you didn't see me animating at all, because that was kind of like a last minute thing that I thought of, and I thought it would look cool with one of the stings of the guitar. Basically, when you watch the video, you could see I timed a lot of things based on some flare moments from the song, which is how a good visualizer should be. You can see how the camera moves through all these layers, and it was hard to decide how big they should be in order to get the look that I wanted to be, how big or close to the camera they should be in order to get the look that I wanted. And a couple times I had to switch out certain scenes so that I can go forward with another animation and keep moving the scene forward. The most important thing was having smooth transitions between each scene so that it looked natural and like it was just being filmed like on a dolly, or like a train was following them and they were filming them. So that's what the look I wanted to go for. I believe I achieved the looks that I wanted to go for, and I thought that it turned out really awesome. This project was really personal to me, and I think that 13-year-old me would be proud of what she's made, and I hope to make more things like this. I really love combining art and music, and even though I get copyrighted every time I upload a video using people's music, I don't care, because I love doing this and I love making music and art, and I love doing this whether it's in After Effects or Blender, whether using Photoshop or Illustrator. I just think that the results speak for themselves, and I love doing this. I could do this for the rest of my life, even I'm not getting paid. And as always, thanks for watching.